When I attended the Spacecom convention in the UK just a few days ago, I must confess that I really wasn't expecting anything extremely impressive because, after all, the UK is still in their early stages of development when it comes to spaceflight. Granted, they've been doing a lot with satellites and other types of technology for many years, but when it comes to spaceflight, still pretty early. And I was mostly looking forward to the podcast that I was going to be doing with Black Arrow, an emerging space launch provider that I've been talking about quite a bit over the last year or so. And by the way, if you haven't seen this podcast, which was, by the way, the first international podcast that I have ever done with other participants since I started this channel, well, it's linked in the description and at the end of the video. So really, I thought that Black Arrow was going to be the highlight of the convention, and in many ways it was, so I kind of felt that this was going to be as impressive as it was going to get. And boy, was I wrong. Okay guys, here we are at the Spacecom Expo here in the UK. Very, very special event for the future of British spaceflight. Can't wait to go around talking to people, so let's go. All right, who are we talking to first? And by the way, if you're wondering who's following me around with a camera and who's making the audio sound real good, well, that's Joel Ryder at Joel Ryder Media Limited, who volunteered his time to follow me around and film me and make this look professional, which really it never has in the past. And I want to thank him so much for doing that, and also encourage everyone in the UK, if you're interested in somebody to help you out with your media needs, well, he's right in the London area, and I've got his business linked in the description. Let's move on. Morning. My name's Jordan Wright. I'm a social influencer. Nice to meet you. The channel's called The Angry Astronaut. I would be delighted to talk to you folks about what you've been doing. I am I just toured Goonhilly. I'm touring Spaceport Cornwall tomorrow. I'm going to be touring Skyrora here after the IAC event. But I'm very interested to hear, are you willing to give me just a few minutes of your time to talk? Well, as I discovered, some of these vendors were really not permitted to talk on camera unless I had gone through the proper comms channels, and I was beginning to become a little discouraged and wondering whether or not I was actually going to get an opportunity to interview much of anybody. However, then a robot came to my rescue. Are you kidding me? Fantastic. Honestly, I'm assuming Boston Dynamics builds this thing, but to be honest, I don't know. It certainly looks like something that they would build, but I don't see any logos, it definitely looks like something they would build. So let's see what I can find out. But you guys are competitors? Who do you represent?
No, so we're actually a distributor. We're a robotics distributor. We work with a lot of companies to basically sell these robots and then integrate them within an infrastructure. So
Right.
that's mainly what we do. We tend to have a lot of these robots. This is just like a cheaper unit of the
Sure.
Boston Dynamics one because it's kind of like it's remote controlled and it's not as advanced. It's just a showpiece basically. But the main robots, they go into surveillance and they go into burning buildings like mines, kind of areas like that. And they used to capture video and go into tight gaps and places you wouldn't expect a human to go through safely basically.
Right. So is that what you're anticipating the applications to be, generally sending these things where it's dangerous for humans to go, or are there other applications as well?
That's kind of the main one, I'd say, yeah,
Right.
definitely. I'd assume something like this would probably be used in space soon as well, to kind of survey a new planet or something like that.
Right.
Discovery. But yeah, that's kind of the main use for these.
I recently did a video actually, and interestingly enough, the robot kind of looked like this. It's a proposal that was made to NASA's Breakthrough Technologies division, essentially. And the idea is to have robots carry life support for the astronauts, because that's an enormous amount of weight. And on Mars, it's going to be double the weight of what it is on the moon. So, if we were to put, say, 30 kilograms worth of pack or something like that on one of these, first of all, could it handle it? And secondly, how well could, a robot navigate the terrain of Mars?
You'd expect like a high-end unit like this could probably, I'd say, carry around over 100 kilos. So a unit that looks like this would probably carry around that. We do have like big industrial units that go into warehouses. They do different types of payloads, but they're slightly different to a robot that could walk Mars essentially. So you have to kind of sacrifice some of the payload to have a good mobility. So I'd assume, like I said, around 100 kilos for a unit built like this.
Right, and that's certainly within the guidelines of your average life support pack on an astronaut. So
Exactly.
especially in 1/3 gravity on Mars. So it sounds very interesting. And once again, that's not something that NASA or ESA or anybody is talking about. And really carrying all that life support on your back is not an easy thing to do. And having one of these take care of the job for you, or to even have look at that. The capability is astonishing. So one last question, and I'll let you move on. And obviously, I'm sure you're busy. Military applications. What do you foresee for these things? Are we going to be looking at military robots from, maybe not from the UK, but from other nations with a directive to kill? Are we going to have that sort of thing in the future?
I think for the moment there is like some heavy legislation that prevents any of that from happening. And I think it's a very controlled environment. I think the military does use robots now anyway.
Right.
But again, it is very controlled, and these types of robots are mainly used for surveillance again. I think when you start talking about weaponizing these, it gets a bit out of hand. I don't think anyone for the time being is kind of able to kind of do that. It's something that's very well controlled.
But for the Kim Jong-uns of the world, technologically it's possible. Is that right?
Yeah, technologically it's possible.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that's very closely monitored.
And that's good. Let's hope it stays that way, and we just have cute little robots that help us rather than harm us. Definitely.
Even for us as a company, I know how difficult it is to even deal with the batteries and stuff. Like we have robots that get stuck in customs just for a battery. So I'm sure, it is very well controlled.
It's good to hear. Well, once again, the name of your company. I want to make sure that the viewers hear about you.
We're over at, one second, I've got the business cards.
No problem. Take your time.
So we're over at this stand just in the corner.
Yeah, we're at Gem Cable Solutions.
And this is our guy.
Gem Cable Solutions and Robots of London, guys. So yeah, it's not just Boston Dynamics. We've got robots being sold all over the world. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it. Okay, I am here with Andrew Cawthorn, Surrey Satellite Technologies, and I've heard a great deal about you in regards to UK space flight. Can you give me some ideas of the sorts of technologies you're introducing to orbit right now?
Sure. Well, I guess SSTL is all about doing things a bit differently. That's how we started, so we've been doing this for more than 40 years now. Our chairman, Professor Sir Martin Sweeting, originally came up with the idea of using commercial technology, COTS technology in space, and that was how kind of the small satellite industry was born, really. Of course, a lot more people doing that these days than just at SSTL.
Right.
But we've kind of maintained that ethos, really, of trying to look at how do we do things a little bit differently. And for us, therefore, it's can we adopt not just commercial technology, but for instance, we said, well, can we apply the same thing to a commercial telescope? Can we take an astronomical telescope that we bought online and figured out, well, how can we make that work in space instead? We stripped it down, we put it back together, we realized there was a whole pile of bits that we couldn't use, threw them away, replaced them, and from that our Carbonite optical spacecraft was born, which allowed us to do imagery and Earth observation at a very different price point, because it was maintaining that kind of commercial approach to building satellites. And that's really kind of what SSTL is about through and through, is how can we take different approaches to things to really try and change things up a bit and do things at a different price point.
So it sounds like CubeSats, I mean, the word is that about 90% of the satellites that are going to be going up in the next decade are going to be CubeSats. So, I mean, can you give me some other examples of things that CubeSats can do that traditional satellites used to do in the past?
Yeah, well, I guess we are kind of less involved with the CubeSat side of things. From our perspective, it's making sure you've got the right satellite, the size of satellite for the job. And I think probably what we're seeing is that, there becomes a size, you need to get to a certain size really to get proper utility from the satellite. CubeSats are great for some things, but at some point there is also kind of limits of physics and so on that get in the way, especially for optical missions. The aperture is just a little bit too small on what you can get on a CubeSat. So for us, this kind of sweet spot ends up being more kind of the 50 kilos kind of number, and most of the things we're building in the 50 to maybe 150 kilo range. But that's not to say that there isn't great utility from the CubeSats, and we're seeing a lot of technology that's kind of first sees its entry into space on a CubeSat, then becoming very useful for the kind of microsats that we're building.
Do you anticipate having a package on board a future launch from Spaceport Cornwall? Or do you have one now?
We absolutely do, yes. So we've got we built one of the payloads on one of the spacecraft that is launching from the first launch. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what's it used for, if you don't mind my asking?
Essentially it's a radiation monitor. So
for outer space.
Understanding the environment, exactly. We've done a lot of work in the past looking and understanding the radiation environment, because, of course, and especially taking the commercial technology approach that we are taking, understanding that environment is very important to understanding, well, what components, what technology can you use in that environment and expect them still to work.
Two more questions. First one is, do you anticipate
doing business with some of the other homegrown providers. Sounds like you're within their payload capabilities, Skyrora, Orbex, that sort of thing, that can carry 300 kilos. Do you think you'll have some opportunities there?
Absolutely. So actually, we have an agreement with Orbex. We've got a spacecraft on the first Orbex launch.
Wow.
When that goes, which is really exciting. And for us, we are about using commercial. We buy launches commercially. So as long as we're getting good deals from these launch providers, then we'd be very happy to use everybody.
All right, now I've got to ask then, the spacecraft on the Orbex flight, can you give me an idea of what that's for?
It's not something we can talk about at the moment, but there will be we will be able to make some announcements soon.
Last question. We have all this stuff heading up right now. I mean, lots and lots of it. Now, the UK, ESA, some of the only organizations, I've done a fair amount of reporting on this, where there aren't a lot of organizations dedicated to a real plan to get rid of all this stuff once it is no longer functional. Do you see your company participating in the solution to that issue with space junk, space debris?
So absolutely, and we have already done a few things. So we built the Remove Debris spacecraft, which was a European funded test bed. It had a number of technologies on board that were looking at how can you address this problem. So it had a net. It deployed a CubeSat and then captured that CubeSat with a net. It also had a harpoon that was showing that the harpoon could penetrate a panel, and therefore you might be able to use that to capture some debris in the future. We're part of the Astroscale mission, the recent mission. We built the spacecraft that was being chased by the Astroscale Catch spacecraft. So we are very much involved. We've just been involved with the UK government active debris removal study phase projects that were going on. So we're very keen to be able to bring our expertise in building satellites to figuring out how you can address this problem.
That's fantastic. Now that you mentioned all that, I remembered a couple of months ago I made a video about that particular package you put on the ISS.
Yes.
And all those technologies were quite amazing.
And yes, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I did make an in-depth video about Surrey and about what they did on the ISS. This is not just computer-generated imagery or anything. This is the technology actually being tested a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a whole lot of follow-up on this extremely effective tech. Instead, the investment has been pretty sad. Aside from ESA and the UK Space Agency, they've been investing millions of dollars in a solution, but it's time for other nations and other organizations to invest billions of dollars. Are you listening, Elon?
I am here with James Fairbairn of the Cornwall Space Cluster.
That's
is that
right,
correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
And you've heard me talk about Cornwall all the time, but just essentially in regards to Goonhilly and the spaceport, and I know there's a lot of other things going on in Cornwall in regards to spaceflight. Can you give us sort of an overview of what's happening?
Well, so Cornwall's actually got a lot of activity happening. So the exciting noise is spaceport and Goonhilly, but actually it's wider than that. There's about 150 businesses in Cornwall who in the space sector or use satellite data for their everyday things. So Cornwall's got an active focus on mining, offshore floating wind, and space. And you use space data for surveying for mining, you use space data for surveying for wind turbines. So it all comes together as a nice kind of mix. So there's about 150 businesses in Cornwall using data for space or actively selling into the upstream space sector. But and we're coming together as Cornwall Space Cluster as a way of kind of promoting them. We have R&D funding to help grow the business community. And it's coming on brilliantly, actually. the noise and everything from Goonhilly and Spaceport is amazing, and then they're coming on the journey as well.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, I got two-part question. I asked Airbus the same question, by the way. Boris Johnson talked about 10%, wanting to capture 10% of the world's private space flight revenue, or its private space revenue in any event. Lots of money there. First of all, do you think that's feasible? And second of all, do you think Liz Truss is going to support that notion as well?
The first one, in terms of I think it's a big challenge. I'd love to say that, and we're doing our best down in Cornwall to help. And our economy has grown greater, much more. Our percentage of the space market has gone up massively, but it has come from a low base. But and in terms of Liz Truss, I don't know, to be honest. I'd love to hope that she does support us going forward. I'm sure she will. Their ideology is fairly similar, so yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, certainly. So give us some examples of where you're headed with, I mean, some of the companies that you're the most excited about.
So there's a couple. So there's one called Exobotics, which is a spin out of Cambridge University, and they're a CubeSat manufacturer that was originally a lunar rover system, and it's now turned into a kind of CubeSat manufacturer, developed their own lightweight solar panel technology. They're really different and interesting and kind of really entrepreneurial, so I love them. There's another company called Datageopoly, which came out of our Launchpad incubator program down in Falmouth, and they're a data tourism app that uses GPS and tracking to basically gamify your experience as you go around places. So they're really exciting, and their two leaders are really charismatic leaders. They're amazing, actually. So those are two really exciting ones, but we've got so many to talk about. They're just doing some random technology. You kind of go, that's just very different. But there's one called Ferritech, very different. A marine business that are pivoting into space comms as well, really interesting. So, and we've got one called Piran Composites, they used to make pseudo satellites for Prismatic and who are now BAE Systems. They're now pivoting into space with lightweight antenna structures. So there's lots of different things happening, and it's really quite cool. So yeah, there's so much.
And one other question in regards to, this is something I asked your colleagues over at Surrey, in regards to space debris, space garbage, that's something that the UK and ESA seems to have a particular focus on. Are there any organisations in Cornwall
Not
that
particularly.
are interested
So in Cornwall
it?
we have a massive focus on the environment. Like Cornwall, like everyone else, but probably maybe slightly more, there's a huge environmental movement in Cornwall. So we are passionate about it, and I'm not sure we have much in the in-space debris issues, but using satellite data to fix environmental problems in Cornwall is so important.
Right.
Be it water quality, be it heat loss, be it traffic pollution. We're really focusing on how space can help our net zero ambitions. So yeah, it is quite exciting, but I can't think of one for in orbit.
Right.
And I have forgotten one company who's really interesting called Aspia Space, who is one of the guys on the stand at the moment. They are basically an AI company that removes clouds from satellite data. Obviously, they don't magic it away, but they use infrared data and optical data, and they merge these together. So if it's a cloudy day, they'll use this SAR data to see through the clouds, and they'll match it with historic data and use it to basically magically make the clouds go away. And they've got the patent on that, and it's really quite exciting. So yeah,
it's amazing. I have to admit, I find it just both fascinating and very exciting to hear that this is happening in an area that I've always loved since I first visited Cornwall in 1977 as an 8-year-old child. So yeah, I've always been very excited. So do you feel that, I mean, given the current economic stresses that are pulling at Britain right now, do you feel that Cornwall is part of the solution, that being able to employ people?
Well, yeah. So Cornwall does have a lot of challenges, and I'm not going to hide that. We have lots of challenges, social housing issues, but space is a way of creating higher paid jobs, and that's how we help. With the higher paid jobs, with really cool new technology, is basically helping to change our economy. It inspires the next generation, so that's such an important part. It's getting the kids excited, so the kids don't have to go, I've got to leave Cornwall to get a job, be it London, be it elsewhere. We're hoping to retain our youngsters to stay in Cornwall. So the space economy is so important to helping drive it forward and keeping our people in Cornwall.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. And like I say, I wish you all the success in the world. Look forward to seeing everything happening in Cornwall, especially the launch coming up hopefully here in a few weeks.
Oh, it's going to be so exciting. Really, really amazing, actually.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to see it.
Brilliant.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
But wait a minute, you clickbaiter, you, where's my hypersonic space plane? Well, after the interview was concluded, I was handed a brochure from Space Engine Systems, a company out of Canada that's moving a lot of their operations to Cornwall, not least of which, for as far as justifications are concerned, because they have a spaceport and an airfield to operate out of, and this is another SSTO idea. A lot of you may think that it's just pie in the sky, but the ambitions are pretty damn huge, and they're looking at their first test flight in 2023. The first of their vehicles is called the Hello 1, and it is 100% reusable, which I really like. It's powered by 2 air-breathing engines and also a single 100,000-pound thrust class liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen rocket engine. It's designed to fly suborbital to an altitude of about 100 kilometers and also attaining speeds of about Mach 5. This is what they're going to be flying in 2023, and this will be followed by the Hello 2, which takes things to a whole different level. 5.5 metric tons to low Earth orbit, almost 2 tons to geosynchronous equatorial orbit, and 760 kilograms all the way to a lunar landing. And if this sounds like just a bunch of nonsense backed up by a little bit of computer-generated imagery, well, have a look at this.